Hello, welcome to my group Jovito, Claire, Cindy, and I's presentation on Python for Passmores University. Okay, first a brief introduction and description of the scenario. So what is the situation? Our presentation basically looks at Passmores University, which wants to build an information system that acts as a student database. This should be accessible to students, staff, and administration, and should have different functions and features. These include, but are not limited to, courses taken, the fee status of students, and all dealings with the university registry. And basically our presentation then focuses on whether it is appropriate to include Python as part of the three-tier architecture on which the information system should be built. Okay, so in order to make a judgment on whether Python is appropriate, we first have to understand what the three-tier architecture is. So what is it? By definition, it's a client-server software system that separates functions into three different tiers: the data tier, the application tier, and the presentation tier. These tiers can be located in different locations on multiple computers, and the three-tier architecture also has several benefits over other architectures. For example, it's highly scalable, as tiers can be individually upgraded and updated. Also, there's separate access to all the different tiers, which can also have multiple benefits. And lastly, it can also have performance benefits. For example, the presentation tier can cache requests without necessarily the data tier or application tier working. Okay, so the first tier is the presentation tier, and this is where all the information is displayed. This is usually the only tier where that the clients will see and use, and it's ultimately the final product that the user associates with the database or the information system. Typically, applications like HTML and cascading style sheets are used in this tier. There were this cascading style sheets, add the color and the flare. JavaScript is also used to add the interaction, and jQuery is used lately to make it uniform across different browsers. Okay, the second tier is the application tier. This is where the functionality of the application is written. This is where all the code is contained, and it's also the tier that connects the first and the third tier. This would be the tier where Python would be used on as a programming language to define the logic of the system. Python would thereby be used along with its Django framework, which is a web framework that includes features such as an access control list. The third tier is the data tier. This is where the database server is located. It responds to all the application tier's requests. In Python's case, it would be good to use MongoDB, NoSQL database. On the third tier, this would have multiple benefits, as MongoDB is a database that is not only relational, it has a low latency, high performance, high scalability, very manipulative, and it can handle unstructured data. Also, if it's used with PyMongo, a Python distribution, this can work well with the MongoDB database. So looking at this diagram, this is an example of a student login in the three-tier architecture. So a user would enter a unique username and password on the first tier. The second tier would send a query to the data tier to check if the details are correct. The third tier would check the details in the database and send a signal back if a match is found or not. The second tier would then process the signal, and the first tier would tell you if you're logged in or not. So now, in order to understand if Python is appropriate for the information system, we have to look at the requirements of a second tier application in the information system. Okay, so what are these? Basically, the application has to be maintainable and updatable. If there's any expansion in the future, it obviously has to be changeable. Also, if there are any bugs and runtime errors, it has to be updatable. Okay, then also it has to be able to deal with the capacity and the speed of a large student database, that with multiple requests, the system will have to have a very good runtime speed. It also, any application on the second tier has to be able to deal with the complex functionality of the system, and has to be able to glue the third and the first tier together. As part of the complex functionality, for example, it will have to deal with the user identity authentication and usage, so that teachers and students have a separate access and a separate functionality. It also has to deal, the technology also has to be highly secure, as there's a lot of personal information in the student database that should not be breached. Lastly, one also has to consider the affordability and the cost of the system. It has to be relatively low in order to make it all viable for the university. So now, what is Python? Python is a high-level object-oriented dynamic programming language invented by Guido van Rossum in the 1980s. It emphasizes readability and simplicity and includes large, extensive libraries and functionality. It is frequently used in our normal world, even by huge companies that we all know, such as HP, Philips, Intel, and Instagram. In comparison to many other similar programming languages, Python has several advantages and disadvantages. Its advantages are that due to the emphasis on simplicity and readability, Python is a very simple language and also very easy to learn. This makes the speed of development and productivity much higher, as Python is not as complex as other programming languages. Also, Python has an extensive support library, as we already mentioned. This means it can do a lot of functions and it can complete a lot of tasks. One of these functions means that it's good for web development. It is also a good integration language, as there are many other applications on the first and third tier that are written specifically to work with Python, such as MongoDB. However, there are also several disadvantages to using Python for Passmores University. As it is not a compiled language, its runtime speed is slower. Also, it has difficulties with multi-processor and multi-core work as a language. Similarly, as errors are only flagged in runtime, there are more runtime errors than if it was a compiled language where these errors are flagged earlier. Also, because Python is a rather general language, a rather simple language, there are multiple methods of completing things. This means that often these methods are less focused and one may find it difficult to write in Python. Also, as Python is not a compiled language, the code can be downloaded off the web, which creates security issues. So what do the advantages and disadvantages mean for Passmores University? Python clearly has the capabilities to be used as a technology in the information system. It has a large library which can create good functionality. It is also a good glue language and therefore adapt to the requirements of the system. Also, it has the advantage that it's a very readable and simple language, therefore developing a program in it would be easy and quick, and also the maintenance may therefore be more efficient and potentially also cheaper. However, there are also some drawbacks to using Python. These limitations include the fact that it's not great with the multi-processor, multi-core work. It could have a potentially low processing power, and there are some security issues. Therefore, Passmores University would have to find a way to work around these issues if Python is to be used in the system. We therefore recommend that we believe that Python is suitable as a technology for the information system. Its advantages clearly outweigh its drawbacks, and it would work well in cooperation with the technologies mentioned. And then for the issues, we believe that for the runtime speed, the Python's extensions Cython and PyPy could be used. These give Python a runtime speed similar to that of C or C++. And then for the security issues, potentially another programming language has to be used, such as Java or C++, for the more personal systems such as grades.